many, not all, but many MMO studios are comprised of developers that are just so out of touch with what their players want. That's a sad truth, the sad reality. Archeage 2 is proof of this. Players were already on the fence about whether they should play it or not after what XL Games did to its predecessor. Archeage was one of the most popular MMOs of the last decade. It had the potential to truly reshape the genre, this faction-based PvP, its naval warfare, its combat, its tri-talent class tree system, in an active effort to remove what made Archeage so special to so many people, and to, for all intents and purposes, kill the game before it even releases. Reports are coming in confirming that the devs are no longer interested in maintaining the PvP system that attracted so many people and retained our interest for so long. You heard that correctly. They stated that Western players, which they are attempting to appeal to, are used to and prefer single player narrative driven experiences. And for single player games, that's true. And that is what they are attempting to do here with Archeage 2, which is an MMO, not a single player game, to the dismay of many players. The article in specific that we're referencing here and going to discuss is posted on WCCF Tech. The title: Archeage 2 leaves large-scale PvP behind to appeal to Western console players, focusing on PvE and GVG instead. PvE, of course, being player versus environment, not player versus player, and GVG being guild versus guild, as opposed to the open world faction-based PvP that was present in its predecessor. Now, before we delve into what this means for Archeage 2, let me take a moment here to thank our incredible patrons over on Patreon who allow for me to continue to push out regular videos like this on MMOs every single week. You guys are amazing. Let's start from the top. Today, South Korean Kakao Games reported its quarterly financial results and shared some new details about Archeage 2 during the earnings call with investors. The MMORPG announced last year that it will be different from its predecessor, since publisher Kakao Games and developer XL Games are making it specifically for Western players, taking into account console users, whereas the first one was decidedly a South Korean PC MMO. As a result, the large-scale faction PvP is being abandoned, while more focus is being put on story-based PvE content, single-player and co-op for small parties tackling dungeons. Guild versus guild PvP strife will remain, mainly centered around trade runs. Kakao Games is planning a reveal at Gamescom 2024 with a closed beta test later that year. So what we take away from this is that they are targeting Western players here. It's a Korean game with Korean developers and what they believe Western players want, and clearly don't understand, because if you think about it, some of the most popular Western video games in the world are PvP games like Fortnite, PUBG, like Overwatch and Overwatch 2 when they were semi-relevant. Games that pit friends up against one another. Cooperative survival games with two different factions on opposing sides. They also confirmed they'll be putting a focus on single player and co-op for small parties that are interested in tackling dungeons. So dungeons are going to potentially be doable solo, disregarding the multiplayer aspect in the MMO acronym. They state small parties. Does that mean 2 or 3 players as opposed to the normal 5 to 6 that is present in the majority of MMOs? They will be appearing at Gamescom 2024, so it's good to know. But they also state there will be a closed beta test later in the year. But Archeage 2 was confirmed to be releasing fully in 2024, so I'm not sure how that's going to factor into the release, or whether the release will be delayed into 2025. Archeage 2 is a radical departure from its predecessor's large-scale PvP between factions. That one line right there is enough to dissuade the large majority of players that were interested in Archeage 2 from playing. Players that loved Archeage 1 but hated what it ultimately turned into, which admittedly was a direct result of mismanagement and incompetent developers who are also working on Archeage 2 and evidently haven't improved, reflecting the Western market's familiarity with action-packed single-player based console games. Single player, exactly. This is not a single player game. This is an MMO. I don't understand, like, I don't think they grasp the fact that people that were interested in single player games get what they want from a single player game by playing a single player game, not by playing an MMO. If you want to play Elden Ring, if you want to play God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, the new Final Fantasy 16 game, then you're gonna play them. You're not gonna play an MMO. And if you want an MMO, large-scale multiplayer content, you're not gonna play a single-player game. Making an MMO a single-player game is the wrong way to do this. And you're going to severely inhibit your game by appealing to an audience, a demographic of players that you think want this, when in reality, they don't. What they want is Archeage 1, but not pay to win, with better graphics, better combat, and a more competent dev team. That is it. That is literally what we want. Instead, single-player content was the primary focus for growth, with players enjoying the fun of strategically capturing strongholds through sophisticated non-targeting actions. The game also has a rich community component, with small parties and guilds tackling dungeons and trading specialized goods through trade. The game also features a campaign mode that combines the conflicts and battles between guilds that trade and those that seek to sabotage and plunder, as well as the conflicts and changes in the major factions and characters from the original story into a complete scenario. So, like, you're gonna pursue this as kind of like a main campaign, as opposed to something like WoW, where it's just a story that you follow. This is going to be designated as an actual scenario. That is interesting. It also feels like it's going to be disconnected from the game overall. The game is being developed in parallel for PC and console platforms since the beginning of the development, and we'll probably reveal more details about core gameplay elements in various forms at next year's Gamescom. Furthermore, we're aiming for a closed beta test in 2024. That's promising. I'd love to get into the closed beta test because I'm curious how they're going to fuck this game up. And at the same time, I'm also curious if the closed beta test being slated for 2024 means the release date is going to be altered and pushed back into 2025, which I know we touched on just a little bit earlier in the video. With such a schedule, Archeage 2 is unlikely to be fully released before the end of the year, as originally promised. Still, it wouldn't be unexpected, as game delays are par for the course for the industry. According to information previously shared by Lineage creative director producer Jake Song, the Unreal Engine 5 powered MMORPG will improve the predecessor's trade system by allowing players to set up caravans alone, in small groups, or in large raids. Housing will be expanded too, providing greater customization options and even allowing guilds to create their own towns. Like, okay, expanding on housing, cool. Housing was a fun aspect of Archeage. Allowing guilds to create their own towns, I mean, that's nothing new. This is a feature that has existed for probably a decade or so in the MMO genre. Improving the trade system. The trade system worked and functioned as it was. I do not think personally it needs to be altered. Them altering it into something that they think players want is probably going to mess it up. Them altering various aspects of the game from what made it popular, what made us all love it, is what's probably ultimately here going to make us hate it. That is what's going to make us not play. It's going to deter us from actually playing the game long term. The game is probably going to be beautiful. The game is going to have great combat. It's probably going to excel where Archeage excelled. But the removal of PvP, which was a core focal aspect of the game, will inhibit it from achieving what Archeage achieved and from what Archeage could have achieved. Making this a single player game as an MMO is the wrong way to pursue it. I'm stating this right now. I don't want to be a negative Nancy here, but if the game releases like this, it is going to fail. And that is ultimately bad news for players that were interested in potentially playing the game. Now, if Archeage 2 is not of any interest to you though, absolutely no problem. I got you covered with 2 different videos on screen right now that might be of more interest to you.